Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. Author D. Larry Gregg, Sr. has written a book that explores early Christian origins through the life of the New Testament figure Timothy. The name of the book is Timotheus, the Most Faithful. And the author, Larry, is right here with me now, and we get to talk all about this. Larry, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Larry, can you tell me all about this book and what readers are going to find here?
Well, essentially, this is the sequel to an earlier book entitled Timotheus, Dearly Beloved Son. It essentially takes the New Testament character Timothy and imagines for him a life and a ministry based upon what we know about him from early Christian sources, and then, of course, to some degree, my imagination. It is both the first book and Timotheus the Most Faithful are historical novels, and they are, while they have a Christian setting or an early Christian setting, they are not Christian devotional novels. These are not novels where everybody becomes a Christian or everybody is persecuted or whatever. What I try to do is to set the characters of early Christianity into the culture in which they lived, both politically and socially and culturally and religiously, and reflect, to the best of my understanding, what life would have been like for those people as they sought to live out their faith in a rather complex and complicated world.
So what sorts of readers did you have in mind when you were working on this?
Well, what I have in mind is people who are interested in historical reading. For a lifetime, basically, I have been fascinated by the outstanding historical writers of particularly the 20th century. James Michener became a hero of mine early on and was my first real introduction to biblical archaeology in his book, The Source. But I was impressed by his ability to carry the thread of the life and the history of a variety of people along parallel to one another so that a well-rounded story gets told. And so the audience that I have in mind, certainly I would like for the general public to feel good about reading the novel, but also for people who are Christian in their religious orientation and who would like to know more about the early centuries of their faith without having to become specialists in patristics or what we call early church history. My background is in theology and particularly in historical theology. And so what I'm trying to do with these novels is to tell the story from the historian's perspective rather than specifically from the Christian minister's perspective.
So was Timotheus a novel that took you a long time to write and put through that publishing process?
Well, that's an interesting question. Someone asked me some time ago about an earlier book that I wrote. How long did it take you to write that? And I told her about 30 years. And she said, it took you 30 years to write it? And I said, well, it took about 27 years to get the kind of background and knowledge I needed, and then about 3 years to write it. Timotheus the Most Faithful was written over a period of probably a year and a half to 2 years. And I've had an outstanding relationship with the publisher and with the people who were assigned to work with me on the production of the book. Very positive experience with Newman Springs Publishing.
Yeah, there's a lot involved in that publishing process. Is there anything you can think of that's especially challenging for you when it comes to publishing?
Well, quite frankly, and again, my observation of students in the classroom over time has been writing ain't hard. It's the rewriting that's hard. As you try to refine it, try to say it more clearly, more concisely, and with more insight and more drama in it from time to time. And so that's the laborious part of it. And then having one of the challenges with this kind of historical novel is that when the manuscript chapters are fed to a computer and the computer paired with Koine Greek or Latin or the names of Roman historical figures and things of that nature, it often wants to change stuff and bring it up to the 20th century. And I have to keep pushing back with publishers to say, no, we want this to reflect how people thought and lived in the first 2 centuries of the Common Era, not in the 21st century.
I think a lot of readers are going to find this really interesting. Again, it's titled Timotheus, the Most Faithful. It's written by D. Larry Gregg, Sr., and published by Newman Springs Publishing. So really you can find this everywhere, like on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Larry, it's been fantastic talking with you, learning all about Timotheus. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it very much.
This is a tale of farmyard friendship and fun. It's the new book written by Beverly Lawrence, titled Dewey Gets New Siblings. This is part of the Dewey, Cosmo, and Charlotte Three Little Pigs series. And Beverly is sitting right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. We get to talk all about this book. Beverly, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Beverly, can you tell me all about Dewey Gets New Siblings and what you've written about here?
Yeah, Dewey Gets New Siblings is the first of a three Little Pigs series about growing through life experiences. Dewey is a mentor for Cosmo and Charlotte, who are piglets. In this book, Dewey Gets New Siblings. Dewey's family adopts Cosmo and Charlotte, so Dewey helps them to feel welcome while explaining the meaning of adoption.
Beverly, what kind of a reading audience did you have in mind for this?
My target audience is toddlers through grade school. I see it as a way for families to explore issues that their kids encounter while growing up and hopefully open lines of communication with their family.
How did that come about? How'd you get the idea for this?
Actually, one of my friends, Josh and Lauren, purchased Dewey as an adult Coon pig and then purchased 2 piglets, Charlotte and Cosmo. So these pigs are actually real pigs. That is their real name, and they live on a real farm. So I was kidding him about having 3 little pigs, and I said, you should write about them. And he said, oh, no, not me. So I said, well, I can, partner with you, and I can write about them. And that's actually how it was born.
So is this the first time you've done something like this, or are you experienced in the whole writing and publishing thing?
This is my first book. Years ago, I actually wrote an article for Oil and Gas Tax Quarterly for a title was A Primer in Oil Import Fees. So this is quite a bit different than my former venture.
I would say. Did this take you a long time to write and publish and all that?
No, the idea was pretty clear in my head what I wanted to do. And I had several ideas because, like I mentioned, it's a series. This is the first one because this is the family coming together. It actually did not take very long to write at all, and I ran it past Josh because they are, his pigs and it's his family. So I got permission from him, and we're actually partnered on the book now. And then I went with Christian Faye Publishing in a hybrid contract to get publishing done, and that actually took longer than writing the book. However, it was a wonderful experience, and they were very attuned to my vision.
Yeah, a really important part of a book like this is the illustrations. So, Beverly, was that a smooth process to get those illustrations lined up with just what you were seeing in your head?
That was seamless. They asked me to pick a type of art, which I did, and then they told me how many illustrations they wanted to do. So I broke down the book itself into bits that would fit into the 8 illustrations, gave them my idea of what I wanted, and the illustrations were far beyond my expectations.
You put a lot of time, a lot of work into this, and then that day came, and it was finally a real thing, the finished product, your first copy. You're holding it in your hands, Beverly. What was that moment like for you?
It was a little surreal. I never actually expected, had never, as a kid, said, hey, I'm going to be an author. But then it actually happened. I felt good about it. I loved the content. And then the book came, and it was everything I thought it'd be and more.
Well, Beverly, it's official. You're a published author now. So when you think about that, what's the most rewarding aspect of it for you?
I think being able to reach out and help kids negotiate life. When I was a kid, we didn't have the kind of support that kids have now, and I was just very excited to become a part of that, to help kids understand what other people are thinking and their own feelings and how to work through things. And so I try to present in my books both sides of if any thoughts that I'm, tracking down and working through.
So a lot of people who are listening right now are authors just starting out as well. So maybe do you have some advice that you could toss out there for them?
For kids, I would say, definitely try to keep an open line of contact and talk to your parents about anything and everything. And parents, be attuned to your kids and watch them and listen to them, because sometimes the clues they give you are rather subtle.
Well, what a great book. This is going to be a wonderful series. Again, this is the first book of the Dewey, Cosmo, and Charlotte Three Little Pigs series. It's titled Dewey Gets New Siblings. This is written by Beverly Lawrence and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So find it at places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also right down the street at your local bookshop. Beverly, it's been fantastic talking with you today and learning all about your work. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.
The new book by Peter Hardy. It's titled The Great Globe Itself, A History of the 18th and 19th Century. Well, this explores historical European political dynamics. And the author, Peter, is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. We get to talk all about the book. Peter, welcome. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm curious to know what you've written about here in The Great Globe Itself, Peter. Can you tell me all about the book?
Well, it's an attempt to tie European and American history together and to see how they coincide, because sometimes when you read history, it's focused on one aspect of it and it doesn't even know that something important is going on down the road and how it might be connected. It's an attempt to show the connectedness of society.
And would you say your primary reading audience that you had in mind for this would be history buffs?
History buffs, yes. Or people who are interested in, learning about it, not the headlines of history, but maybe delving a little deeper.
How did this come about, Peter? What gave you this idea?
One of the authors that I read years and years ago was Titus Livius. He's an ancient Roman author. He wrote a chronicle of ancient Rome back in the days before the emperors. And I was inspired by that you could really find out about how things happened by using an analytic approach, a year-by-year approach. And so I tried to translate that to more recent times, starting in the 1700s.
And if I had to guess, something like this, probably a lot of research involved. I think it would have taken you a while to write. Is that right?
Yeah, you have to do your homework. You have to look at both sides of things. You have to read things from the American point of view, and you have to read things from the English point of view and the French point of view to find out what's really going on. If you just read it from the viewpoint of the British, for example, the British historians, they tend to root for their team, so to speak. So, the British Army never loses a battle. And so you have to, how did Napoleon win? So you have to see both sides. And then I think you get a better handle on what really happened. And it kind of gives it a flavor of, it kind of turns people into living, or historical figures into living, breathing people who had real lives, I think.
Peter, what would you say was your biggest challenge while you were working on this?
Trying to get it right. Sometimes you have to, if you don't tell things in the right order, you leave false impressions. So getting everything in chronological sequence, because sometimes that's important. This event happens before this one, so you can find out which event is the cause and which one is the effect. Sometimes historians get that backwards.
So you completed your draft, you handed that off to the publisher, to Covenant Books, and you started that whole process. Peter, was that a smooth one, or did you have some speed bumps maybe along the way?
I do a lot of writing, but when you have that big of a draft, I think it's like a 250-page book. When you got that many words, there's a lot of editing that needs to be done. And you don't want to be repeating yourself. You tell things once, and then because in your first draft, you tend to repeat yourself, get things out of order. So the editing process is very rigorous, but Covenant has a great setup that allows you to get it right, to take care of a lot of the details and make sure you have a smooth flowing narrative that doesn't repeat itself too often.
And then that day came, you put all this work into it, and you get your first copy in, and you're holding this physical thing that you were working on, Peter. What kind of a moment is that like for you?
It's a feeling of accomplishment, setting a goal and achieving it. It's a good-looking product. They help you with they've got designers who design the covers, and so that you can be proud of what you achieved and you brag to your friends and your family. I've got 6 brothers and sisters, and so I sent signed copy to each one of them. They knew I'd written the book, but yeah, I think I went up in my family's esteem, and they said, boy, talk about establishing a legacy. So a couple of them took it as a challenge about legacies in life.
Well, this sounds like such an interesting book. Again, it's titled The Great Globe Itself, A History of the 18th and 19th Century, Part 1. It's written by Peter Hardy, published by Covenant Books, and really available everywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Peter, it's been great talking with you tonight and learning all about this. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
The audiobook edition of the book by Linda Fergerson, titled A Royal Dance, The Lion and the Butterfly. Well, it's available now, and we get to talk all about this. Linda is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Linda, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm curious to learn all about A Royal Dance, so Linda, can you tell me all about it?
Well, A Royal Dance is actually my own story told through the eyes of Jerusha in first century Jerusalem. I suffered sexual abuse as a child. So it's my journey out of the darkness of that into the light of Jesus Christ and his kingdom.
Linda, would you say that you were writing this for others that have had these same kind of experiences that you have?
You could say that. I honestly never wanted to be a writer. My writing journey is another story in itself. Started over 40 years ago. Someone challenged me to write my story, and I said, no way. They said, pray about it. I said, okay. I put 3 things before God. I said, this will tell you how far back I was. I needed a typewriter. I need my husband's support and a desire to do it. So my husband gives me a typewriter for Christmas, but the desire to do it came much, much slower, longer journey.
Have you ever done anything like this before, as far as writing, publishing, and all that?
Not when I started, 40 years ago, but when I first started with my husband's support, I enrolled in a correspondence course by mail. And also, to tell you how far back I was, we corresponded through cassette tape through the mail. We didn't have emails and things at that point. And then I took other writing courses, went to writers' conferences and things like that over the years to begin. And she suggested I do devotionals and women's magazine articles. So she helped me, and I was published in a few things like that. But I ran away from writing, didn't want to do it, wasn't my desire to do it. It's been a journey, let me tell you.
I bet. So once you got serious with it, you decided, hey, I'm going to publish this thing, and you got to work on it. Was that a long journey for you?
Once I made up my mind to get serious, I wrote it to start out with as a parable. And I just wanted to be obedient to what I thought God was telling me to do, get it done and be done with writing. But when I got that far, I had a content editor looking at it, and I was just going to publish it and be done with it. She said, I think you have a novel. And I said, I don't know how to write a novel. So she took me under her wing for 9 months, and we turned my parable into this novel and 2 other novels as a result of we didn't get all the way through the parable. So she helped me get started with getting it written. Then I decided I just would self-publish it and be done with it. And that publishing, marketing, and all that kind of thing, it's another whole journey.
What did you find the most challenging part of that publishing end of things?
Trying to decide between going for a traditional publisher or a hybrid indie publisher, or try to do it myself through Amazon publishing, or just trying to decide which way to go was a learning curve.
Of course, we're talking about the audiobook edition, so all the time when you're writing this, you're reading your words off the page, and all of a sudden with the audiobook, you're hearing your own book read back to you. Linda, what's that like? It's
touching to hear it in audio format. I pursued the audio format because my son suggested that a lot of young people prefer audiobooks. Mm-hmm. So that journey to go that way, there was, again, many options in how to present it in audio format. So the whole process is so new to me, even the audio, not my thing. Honestly, I'd never have even listened to an audiobook, but I just went that direction because I know many people do, and I want the story to get out to as many people, especially women who have gone through something similar as possible.
Well, I know there are going to be lots of readers, lots of audiobook listeners who will be blessed by this book. Again, it's titled A Royal Dance, The Lion and the Butterfly. This is written by Linda Fergerson, published by the Audiobook Network, so you can go to wherever you normally pick up your audiobooks and you can get it, like Audible, iTunes, and Amazon. Linda, it was really nice talking with you tonight. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
I'm really happy right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable to be sitting down with author Terry R. Kern. Terry, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me here tonight.
Thank you, Corey. It's nice to be with you.
Terry, congratulations. You have a new book out. The title is Yahweh. It's all about his name. Can you tell me all about what you've written here?
Well, it's all about his name. Yahweh is the name of the one and only supreme being. In the universe, there's only one God, as Christians and Jews believe, and it's all about his name, as described for us and told to us in the Bible.
Terry, what sorts of readers did you have in mind when you were working on this?
Well, anybody who's interested in the Bible, anybody who is interested in Christianity or even Judaism, anybody who wants to know anything about the most supreme being, the only supreme being in the universe, God, who we call him God, but that's not his name, that's a title. His name is Yahweh, and he makes that known to us very, very clearly, literally thousands of times in the Bible.
So, Terry, how did this come about? What inspired you to get started on this?
Well, I've been a pastor for many, many years, and of course I study the Bible a lot and have been all the way through my pastoral career. Some years ago, I began looking at this particular issue. The name of Yahweh is in the Old Testament of the Scriptures, and the more I studied it, the more I became aware of all these different things. For example, the name Yahweh, he himself printed his name in the Old Testament alone of the Scriptures 6,828 times. So obviously it's an important thing to him to have his name known, but billions of people in the world, very, very few people know his name, let alone know and understand why it's important that they would know his name, what it means, and the difference it makes to know his name and to use it and to say it and to understand its significance.
So once you sat down and got started on this, Terry, was this a long journey for you, the writing, publishing, everything?
Oh, yeah. Just pulling together all the ideas and the information was many years of study, and actually getting the book published was much, much longer than I thought it would be as well. It took over a year to get the book published, and so, yeah, it's a challenge, but I didn't intend to be an author. That's not why I wrote the book. I wanted to have my name in print or anything like that. It was simply because I really believe that this is so important for people, and that Yahweh himself wants people to know his name, and he wants people to say his name and understand what it means. It really does make a difference. It's amazing how much it changes your reading of the Old Testament when you understand that his name is Yahweh. And when you also understand, as I say in the book, that the name Jesus in the New Testament is a form of Yahweh. The name Jesus in Hebrew is Yeshua, which is Yahweh saves. It really is important to understand what Yahweh means.
You said you had a year into the publishing process. Terry, what did you find the most challenging part of that end of things?
Well, I guess just waiting. Waiting for it to happen. Seemed like it took every step along the way, just took an enormous amount of time.
And when it was finally a real thing, you got the finished product, that first copy, Terry. What kind of a moment was that like for you?
Well, it was pretty rewarding, I would say. Very rewarding, because I had been able to get into print what I believed was something that's very important for people to have in their hands and to see and to read. And, that has been, since it has come out and been published, A lot of people have read the book, and I've heard from them how life-changing and how significant it is for them to know these things and understand them. That's very rewarding.
Wonderful. Well, definitely an important book. Again, it's titled Yahweh. It's all about his name. It's written by Terry R. Kern, published by Christian Faith Publishing, and really available everywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Terry, it's been really wonderful talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show with me.
Thank you for having me, my man. Appreciate it.
This is a tale of adventure and friendship. It's the new book written by Mike Benjamin, titled Hello, Bear. And Mike is sitting down here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, and we're going to talk all about this book. Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Mike, can you tell me all about Hello, Bear and what readers are going to get into here?
Well, the Hello Bear is a simple story that a parent or grandparent would read to a child who wants to be read to, 4, 3, 2, and it's a cute story with nice, colorful pictures to share with the little kids.
And how did the idea for it come about, Mike?
Well, 10 years ago, I became a grandfather, and my first grandchild, Jocelyn, when I didn't have a book, she would say, just make something up, Grandpa. And she liked my stories that I made up better than the ones I read to her. And so she inspired me to work on my stories, and that is where the idea came from. And she loved stories about an animal that is in trouble, a cute animal, and a happy ending because all is well.
I love that. So, Mike, is this your first time then doing this kind of thing?
Yes, it is.
Oh, congratulations. So, being your first one, there's a lot of new territory here. Did this take you a long time overall?
No, not long. A year and a half ago, my wife was doing chemotherapy, and those were 5-hour sessions. And I went to every one with her, and I take my notebook and work on my story while she's getting that done. By the way, she has a clean bill of health today, thank God. So the news isn't bad there. It's good. That's where I had time really to focus on developing actually 3 stories.
One really important element to books like this, of course, is the illustrations. Mike, was that a smooth process for you to get those done just the way you wanted?
Yes, I was quite pleased with how well the illustrator brought my ideas to life. It went very well.
So once you were working with Christian Faith and that whole publishing process, getting the illustrations done, was there anything else about the publishing process and everything involved in that you found particularly challenging?
Well, it's time consuming. You have to be patient. Every step requires a certain amount of time. It took probably 14 months from starting the journey with them to holding the book in my hand, but it was well worth it.
You got to tell me about that moment when you were finally holding it in your hands. That must have been special.
Yeah, it was almost unbelievable. And I just got them in time for Christmas, so my 4 grandkids got to open up a book all at the same time, and they're, Grandpa, it's your book. They're so excited. And there's a picture of the grandkids in the book. They're characters in my book, and I hope someday they'll read them to their grandkids.
So now you're a published author, Mike. When you think about that, what's the most rewarding aspect of it all for you?
I guess the most rewarding is my youngest grandkid is 3 years old. I see him every Monday, put him down for a nap. And guess what? He wants me to read him Hello, Bear when I put him down for a nap. And him sitting on my lap, reading this story to him, I got to tell you, it's just a wonderful feeling.
So looking ahead, do you see yourself maybe writing a follow-up, some more other kind of books here?
Yes, in the story Hello, Bear, there's a couple of deer, a doe and a fawn, and they're paying close attention to what's going on. You'll see them in a couple of the illustrations. And they're the characters of the next book, which will be named something like Oh Dear. And in that book, there'll be a couple ladybugs just in the bushes watching, and the next one is called Don't Bug Me. And the book will be about the ladybugs, the third one. So they're all connected. I hope it'll be a series of 3. They'll all be similar.
So this is your first one, you're working on the next. Is there something you're telling yourself, hey, I'm going to definitely do this part of things differently than I did the first time around?
Absolutely. It's a learning experience. And, each time you do something, you learn from what you've accomplished and you improve it. So I think the next story is even going to be better.
I know that children and families alike are really going to be into this book. Again, it's titled Hello Bear. It's written by Mike Benjamin and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so get it really everywhere, like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Mike, thanks again for coming on the show. Tell me all about Hello Bear. I had a great time talking with you.
I did too. Thank you very much.
I'm really happy right now to be talking with author Faye Irving here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Faye, welcome. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to be speaking with you, and I just have to congratulate you. You have a new book out. It's titled Lessons to My Younger Self, Navigating Through Workplace Discrimination, Racism, and Sexism. So, Faye, you're tackling some really important issues here. Can you tell me about what you've written here?
Absolutely. Corey, it's a much-needed resource for helping young women of color and minorities in their day-to-day battle with workplace adversity. I wrote this book in an engaging way where I recount fun stories from my daughter's youth and talk about those struggles to get herself out of some really compromising positions. And what I do is enhance these strategies and focus on tools that she'll need to utilize as she faces challenges in the workplace today. This wisdom has really made a difference for me, and I know it'll benefit so many others. Why? Because it's a proven playbook that provides insight that can immediately be applied because the basis of recommendations are proven strategies and faith-based principles.
So how did this come about, Faye? What gave you the idea to start working on it?
Well, I'm fortunate to mentor several young people, and the prevailing issue they are dealing with stems from marginalization and challenges in the workplace related to racism, sexism, and discrimination. But I think the more pressing reason was when it hit close to home with our daughter and her negative experiences in the workplace. Then I knew it was time to download that information out of my head to paper, because writing it down is the first step to making it happen.
Yeah, sorry your daughter had to go through that, Faye. Have you ever done anything like this as far as writing and publishing and all that?
No, actually, this is the first time. But now that the book is out, I've been inspired with more topics to delve into, especially as it relates to expansion on themes already covered in the book, themes around early career leadership principles.
So this is your first book. I'm sure it was a learning experience in a lot of ways. So was this a long journey from beginning to end for you?
Well, it only took about 4 months to write because of the passion behind the message. Where I've had to practice patience is really in the publishing process. That took over a year. Everything such as editing, layout, book cover, media formatting, it was all done independent of the other, and nothing was done in parallel. I had to come to the realization that anything ordered by God works in His timing and not my timeline. So I waited, and now we're here.
What would you say was the most challenging part of that publishing process and everything involved in that, like you were saying? Would you say it was the patience, the waiting that was involved?
I think it was the challenge of everything being sequential and nothing parallel. I thought since the book was written and once it was edited, several things can be done at the same time, but because the publishing process has such rigor in it, everything had to depend on the next item being completed.
There was so much hard work went into this, and finally that day came, you got your first copy. It was a physical thing finally, you're holding it. Faye, what was that moment like for you?
It felt amazing. I took a long moment just holding it and just looking at every feature of it.
Well, this is such an important book, and if you're listening right now, definitely go check this out. Again, it's titled Lessons to My Younger Self, Navigating Through Workplace Discrimination, Racism, and Sexism. This is written by Faye Irving and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so really you can get this just about anywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and traditional brick-and-mortar stores as well. Now, Faye, it's been wonderful talking with you tonight and learning all about this book. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Corey. I really appreciate the opportunity.
The audiobook edition of the book written by Daniel L. Wagner, titled With the Stars, it's available now, and the author, Daniel, is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, and we'll be talking all about the book. Daniel, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Yes, I'm here. It was a lot of work to do the book, but it came out really nice. I wrote it about 10 years ago, and it was my first novel. I've been thinking about traveling through different planets, and I have property in Arizona, and I thought of building a spaceship and going there.
So, Daniel, how did the idea for this come about?
Well, I've always wanted to travel to other worlds, and I'm always interested in different things. Why not a spaceship? It's always something that would be interesting for everybody else, too. And not only the spaceship, it was an android. I had to have a helper to build the spaceship. I couldn't do it by myself, so I built Bogdan for that.
Daniel, what kinds of readers did you have in mind when you were working on With the Stars?
Well, I was interested in people who like science fiction and fantasy. I'm a fantasy science fiction writer, and this novel is about science fiction. And science fiction is based on science and what can, the probabilities of science, what can happen as a result. And things that can be made are from science. And the thoughts come to action. The telephone came out. There was someone who came up with the idea, and then all of a sudden there was a telephone. Of course, it took years to do it, but it was done.
So once you sat down, got started writing this, Daniel, how long of a process was this for you? Was this a long journey for you?
It took me less than a year, but I wrote it on paper. I didn't use a computer at first. So I wrote it on paper. It was my first paper book. Later on, I use computers now for all my work, but this one was on paper. Everything was hard work for me.
So once you handed your manuscript off and you started that publishing process, Daniel, what did you find the most challenging about that for you?
Well, I was worried that people would not buy my book. I was worried about that for some time, but now I realize that, if people are interested in science fiction, they'll buy my book. And my book is on science fiction and space travel. I even have a flying saucer in the front of my book. That's what the flying spaceship looks like on my property. I actually have 40 acres. I could put a nice size flying saucer on there in Arizona.
Of course, we're talking about the audiobook edition. So you were writing this, reading the words off the page all that time, and now with the audiobook, you're hearing your own book read back to you, Daniel. What's that like?
Yes, that's interesting. Hearing that said back to me, it's my own words written by me, and someone else is reading them out, which is very interesting. I tried the process myself, but I couldn't accomplish it. It takes a certain skill to do that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So looking ahead, do you see yourself maybe writing a follow-up to this or doing some other sort of writing?
I have 11 books. All of them can be audiobooks.
Fantastic. Are they along the lines of the science fiction genre like this?
Yeah, I have, each one is a continuation, but each one can be a standalone by itself. One of them is specifically about going to Mars, my 7th novel. And then I have other sorts of ones where, going to a world of your own where, you can think of certain things that come up.
So, Daniel, while you're writing, is writer's block ever a thing you have to get through?
Yeah. Right now, I'm just taking some time off. I just need a little time to myself, and I was busy working really hard, and I was spending hours behind the computer, hunched over. My wife was worried about my posture and all that stuff. It's good to take time off and then, come back to it gradually.
Well, it sure sounds like a lot of readers and audiobook listeners are really going to be into this book. Again, the title is With the Stars. It's written by Daniel L. Wagner, published by the Audiobook Network, and really available everywhere. Head over to Audible, iTunes, or Amazon, and you'll be able to pick this up. Daniel, thank you so much again for coming on the show and telling me all about With the Stars. I had a nice time talking with you tonight.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
I'm looking at a book right now that's an inspiring tale based on the author's own experiences. It's titled Dolly Do It and the Improbable Tasks. This is written by Pamela Lewin M.D., and she's right here with me now. We get to talk all about this book. Pamela, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, Corey, thank you. It's a pleasure being here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you, Pamela. Can you tell me all about what you've written about in Dolly Do It and the Improbable Tasks?
Oh, kindly old Dolly Do It is really, the idea came to me because of myself. She's a procrastinator, but not by choice. I think she was overextended in terms of all the things she had planned to do. And so she keeps getting visual cues and she keeps following these cues and finding that she's distracted, goes from one thing to another, never seeming to get anything done. And it's a children's book so that children, at least my own children, loved big words. And I put that improbable in there, particularly because of that. If you guide them and let them look it up, they'll never forget it. So the improbable tasks are because she never finishes any task. She's a mature woman living alone. She means well, very distractible. And so she leaves one unfinished task after another. She lives with her little dog, Flossie, and she has been planning to take Flossie for a walk. But because of all the things she's doing, Flossie's left there looking at her, wondering, when am I ever going to get out? She forgets to water her plants. She forgets to clean the fridge. She plans to bake a cake for her neighbors. And she finally actually does get around to it because there's a little bit of redemption there for Dolly at the end, which I like.
I'm looking at it right now. The cover is really fun, Pamela. Can you tell me how that came together?
All right. I'm a physician, and I used to have an office with my desk in front, a credenza in back. And because I was always wanting to be really perfect in writing up my charts, I used to leave them to the end of the day. So they stacked up behind me on this credenza. So my secretary came to me one day and said, I have this horrible picture of you sitting there and these charts all falling down on top of your head, burying you. So that picture was there. And then I started with the Institute of Children's Literature, and I was doing the first course for writing for children. And then I graduated and started on the book course. So this actually came as an assignment that I was doing. It took me about 3 months to put it together. And that was when my instructor said to me, you should try to see if you can publish this as a book. And then I worked on it a little more, added some here and there and put it together. And here it is.
So this is the first time you've ever done this kind of thing?
That's correct. I like to write, I like to write poetry too. And I'm actually going to put together a book of poetry when I get done with this one. And so I tend to make notes from things that I observe and I keep them. And then I was able to put little snippets together. Now I have that book of poetry almost ready to go.
So once you handed this book off to Christian Faith Publishing and you started the publishing process, Pamela, what did you find the most challenging part of that for you?
Being so new at this, I had not really understood how this whole process works. And initially I was contacted by some folks from outside of the United States who said, we read this book. The manuscript was out there. I had it done once before by Dorrance Publishing, but it never did sell, and so I never did anything about it for years. And they came up with the idea. So I'm thinking, I have this little book there, and they're saying they like this book, so maybe I should go ahead and publish it again. So they called me, and I realized this was a vanity publishing company, and I didn't get a good deal from them. I kept on spending money, of course, over a long period of time, not finding that I was getting anywhere. When someone recommended to me that I should check out Christian Faith Publishing, and I'm very pleased with the job they have done.
And then that moment finally came. You're holding your first copy. Pamela, what kind of a moment was that like for you?
I felt as though I'd just been inducted in a big club, the likes of which we had people like Stephen King, John Maxwell, Mark Levine. Yeah. All of us are now authors. They're bestsellers, of course, and then in time, who knows where my book will go. But I just felt like a new member in a really big organization, and I was very pleased with that.
What a wonderful book. Again, this is titled Dolly Do It and the Improbable Tasks. It's written by Pamela Lewin, M.D., and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So really, you can find it pretty much everywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Pamela, it's been wonderful talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you, Corey. I appreciate that opportunity.
The audiobook edition of the new book by John D. McMickle, titled The Block, a Cryptocurrency Private Eye Mystery. It's out now, and we're going to talk all about it. John is sitting right here with me at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. John, welcome. Thank you for being here with me tonight.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. John, can you tell me all about this mystery, what people can expect here?
Well, the mystery is set up as sort of a neo-noir kind of novel. It's a private detective story where there is a client, a very attractive woman who comes and asks the lead character, Milton Bruckner, for help. She turns out not to be who she says she is. As Milton begins to take her case and investigate her claims, he stumbles into a civil war, so to speak, between various oligarchs who control the money supply in kind of a post-apocalyptic world where government-issued currency no longer exists and the world has moved to a type of cryptocurrency that resembles a digital barter system. And as he delves further and further into this conflict between the oligarchs, he finds out that his own family, unbeknownst to him, had some role in setting up the cryptocurrency network, and they're looking for some background information from him related to a particular file that was put on the network that could unlock a lot of value. And so hopefully it's an opportunity for readers to enjoy themselves and follow a good mystery story, but also learn about the psychology behind money and cryptocurrency and how we as a society need to think about exchanging value as we go into the future.
That sounds really exciting. John, would you say that fans of mysteries and the post-apocalyptic genre are the ones who would most be into it?
I think that's correct. I also think anybody that likes to read financial thrillers would really enjoy this book as well because, like I say, it's post-apocalyptic, but it's all about who controls the money when government authority has crumbled to the point that, you don't have a Treasury Department or a Federal Reserve. There's a great mystery about what happened to the gold reserves, for instance, in Fort Knox that shows up in the book. So I think anybody who's interested in, high finance mysteries and stories might also enjoy the book.
So how did this come about? What gave you the idea for this, John?
Well, so my professional background, I've learned a lot, had to learn a lot about the way business insolvencies are handled. And I had to do some historical research and discovered that in colonial America, before there was an America, when we were still colonies of Great Britain, there was a shortage of money. And so people, particularly what they would have called backcountry settlers, so people not near the coastlines that moved looking for farming opportunities into the sort of foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, they did not have actual money. So they developed their own little individual quirky systems for exchanging value, whether it was an IOU or they mixed British currency with Spanish currency. And it just occurred to me as we think about, the current environment where we have some people worried about devaluing currency and whether currency actually really represents value in the way that it used to historically, that there is actually a precedent in the way the colonial settlers handled financial transactions in the absence of money.
So when it comes to writing and publishing, John, have you done this kind of thing before, or is this a kind of new ground for you?
This is relatively new ground for me. Of course, I've written more academic kinds of articles, and I've written another sort of novel as well that's exploring a completely different topic. But this topic in particular has been something that's been on my mind for some years. It has always struck me, maybe I'm neurodivergent, I don't know, but it's always struck me that the use of, say, the U.S. dollar or any national currency is actually a society-wide contract. I pay you in dollars, you pay me in dollars, and we all agree to do this because we know we can go spend it somewhere else. Part of what the book explores is what happens if that social contract disintegrates and there is simply no trust in currency anymore. Something has to come up in its place. And this is kind of it's a good mystery. It's hopefully a good story that people enjoy, but it's also a thought experiment. What would happen if we all worldwide lost confidence and trust in government-issued money, but we still needed to find a way to transact business?
Well, this sounds really exciting. I really think that a lot of readers and audiobook listeners are really going to love this. Again, the novel is titled The Block, a Cryptocurrency Private Eye Mystery. It's written by John D. McMickle, and this is published by the Audiobook Network. So go really anywhere that you usually get your audiobooks, and you'll be able to pick it up, like Audible, iTunes, and Amazon. John, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about the block. I had a really nice time talking with you.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it too.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.